This is supposed to be a 65 VW bus, and it is really nice. It is beautiful, but nothing works. That's not the first time I've had a restored car here where nothing works, but this is probably the best one. This thing is super well. The upholstery is excellent. You can see around the edges. They're not perfect, but Volkswagen didn't make that part. See, it's got something on there. Maybe that's glue right there. This thing's really clean. It's got the right seats. It's a double door. See the folding seats on each side to get in and out to the back seat when you open this either sliding door. The front right seat's not attached to the car. Okay. There's a lot of play in the steering. All that stuff, you can't buy the body. Well, you can. They make new ones now. I don't know anybody who's tested one. But there's some differences on this thing, and here's one of them. See, that's not a modified single port manifold. That's a Brazilian manifold that can go on that goes on this. See, that's a dual port head with this funny adapter. It's got a J tube because there's no provision for the heater. The muffler, a single pipe, tailpipe, comes out of a cutout like a US version. It's not removable. No provision for the heater, as you can see. It's got IRS, and it looks like it came with it because this welding is so good. See, look at this. That looks original to me. There's your trailing arm. And then there's a side plate for the transmission's different than anything I've seen. And there's your CV joints. It's got one of these things in it. They sell those in the US now. Stamped steel instead of the cast. No provision for heat. I can't find anything. Screwed on belly pans. And then the frame. The frame is different. First time I saw it, it's got a little body work on it. It looks like right here. See, a little edge. But I thought this was made of Bondo, but it isn't. That's how this thing is made. See how it's curves out versus the US versions. There's a right angle there. And there's your trailing arm. And this is why your handbrake might not work in any bus. See this? See how much space there is between here and there? It shouldn't have. It should be like this thing shouldn't be able to move any farther than this. See how the spring is? So it just doesn't touch the spring. You got too much space here. So if you weld on the side of this thing, put a bead on it and grind it, and keep checking it on. Keep welding, grinding, checking. Complete installation with springs, all springs until you get hardly anything there. Because when it's like this, what happens is, right now the cable's adjusted pretty tight because the handbrake doesn't work. The other side, you can't even hardly get the cable off with pliers. This one just came off. But the spring is now compressed. When you connect it to this and pull it on, it's going to compress so much that the coils are going to touch and it won't compress anymore. And you can pull on that handbrake as hard as you can. All you're going to be doing is stretching the cable. You're not going to be moving it, and that's why it won't work. See, it's got to do this to work. And if there's too much slop, the spring compresses before the brakes actually do anything. And I suggest if you're doing this, test it on a hill and see if it works. If you think your handbrake works, go on a hill and think, if this was a new car, would I think the handbrake works? Because a new car and old car, they both supposed to do the same thing. Brand new Ferrari, Toyota, Lexus, handbrake works. This thing's not going to never work right like this. Never going to happen. When you assemble this, before you latch this on, or before you connect it in the front, you should always take them out and grease them, put them back in, and then connect it here. Make sure you got this right. They're not connected in the front. Then adjust the rear brakes, then adjust the front ones, and then adjust the handbrake. A lot of times these springs are so hard to put on because these holes here are in the wrong place. See, I think an earlier, well, yeah, this kind, yeah, I think. This can be very hard to put on because these holes are too far apart. So what you can do is just drill one of them. You just take one brake shoe and drill one more hole in it, a little closer to that side, and then you can get them on. Because I've had some where it's practically impossible to get this. I think it's this spring. You just fight it because you got to put the spring in this on before you assemble it. So you're trying to put this on with this in between, and you can't stretch the spring because the holes are too close. But yeah, this is a Brazilian bus, and I got it all covered up, but there isn't a single thing on it. When he bought it and he went to shut the door, the inside handle just pulled off because instead of using the proper part, somebody drilled a hole in it for a set screw on a new fake, terrible, cheap handle. See, it's got this thing on it. It's got chrome right there. See that? Look at this thing, how long that is. I keep bumping into them. See how long that thing is? It's got Safari windows that have basically using a vent latch with 2 holes screwed into it so they can screw it to a plate. Don't buy this kind. Oh, it doesn't open. Okay. Let me show you. Safari windows. There's some good ones out there. See this? That's the window latch. See how it's shaped, the triangle? Look at this. It's the same thing, cut, and then a couple little tiny screw, little screw. These things love to break. So, and then they're screwed onto this, which is kind of weak too. So don't buy this kind. But look at this thing. And then this fancy turn signal switch, which is too low to engage with the tab. This is the tab right here. That makes the light, the turn signals go off. And see, it's not even in the right place because it won't fit there. And then see, this isn't going to work because I'm probably going to change the steering box. I'm not sure yet. You can hardly move this because this, the shift rod that goes from here to the back, to the front of the transmission. See how close this is to the tube? This is different. US version's like this big. It's, you know, a couple inches in diameter, and there's bushings on this to keep it from hitting it. Look at this. Look how tiny that is. So this is binding. It doesn't like to turn, and it doesn't like to go in and out. When you go first to second, it goes first, second, and then when you go, you know, left to right in neutral, this thing rotates about 20 degrees. It's got a servo that came with this. This is the hose, the pipe for the servo. And see this? See this hose? That's the reservoir hose. See how it goes down like this? You'll never bleed the brakes if the hose that comes from the reservoir to the master cylinder doesn't only go downhill, not horizontal, not a little dip and then back up. It'll never bleed. So this is, I didn't even notice this until today. So there's one more thing to fix. It's a dirty job on a really clean car. See, there's the servo. There's the bottom of the center pin, big giant circlip. There's the new Brazilian. It looks like a new steering box, but it feels like there's something wrong with it. I don't know yet. There's your rod for your servo. This thing came with this. But that, you can see this is new. The beam's got a sticker on it, which, you know, could have come with this bracket, or where a US version wouldn't. But there's the pipe inside the frame for the servo. That's not for something else. So, but yeah, this is important. If you're ever moving your reservoir around, make sure that it's at least a foot above this, okay? And above the master, and there's no undulations. It must only be going downhill. This will never bleed. Because you'll never just, I can explain it, but I'm not going to. But there's going to be air, and the fluid's not going to, it just won't work. This will never work. You could suck it. If you were sucking it out of a bleeder, that's okay. But there isn't a single new car in the world where you have to suck it out of the bleeder. There isn't a single new car in the world where the reservoir feeding the master does anything but go downhill only. No undulations. Those brakes will never bleed. But look how dry the beam that this is. And if you look, you see that? See this guy? It's never even had a grease fitting on it. They probably put some grease on it on assembly, but you should pump grease into it until you see grease coming out of here. Okay? It's got new shocks. The passenger seat isn't even attached to the car. But this is typical of any restoration that I've ever seen. Every single one of them is a fishing lure. except when a fish gets on a fishing lure, he gets nothing. Okay, when you buy a fishing lure, you usually get nothing. But in this case, he got this thing. Is fucking beautiful. I'm almost coming to tears looking at it. Excellent paintwork, upholsteries, everything's immaculate, but nothing works. And when I get done, you can drive this thing to New York. And then the whole country will be able to see it, because everybody loves looking at these old buses, especially the ones with the windows. So that's all I know. There's plenty to do. Oh, look at that ground strap. Have you seen that? That'll work, but I think of better places to put it, And that's probably where the voltage regulator goes. But then where does the air cleaner go? I could put a US version one, but I'd have to drill holes in this to mount it, but this is hollow. Or I could weld it to it or melt the paint. I don't want to drill holes in it. So I'm going to see if he'll go for 2 carburetors. And then when you look inside of this thing, except for this, is going to go. That's going to go. I put a coil on it with the, I don't know what the brand is, that cheap electronic ignition they sell for $100 instead of this elaborate setup. Then you can make it look like it's stock. Okay, like it came that way, because there won't be any extraneous brackets or anything inside of this thing. I'll put a generator in it and put the regulator there. And see, like, here's another example. See that wire right there? That's your cable for your positive. That's not the right gauge. It probably works, but that kind of thing's hard on an alternator and a regulator or a generator, but more so on an alternator. Bad connections kill alternators. This is backwards. See, this should be pointing to in, this part right here. This clip goes here, not there. This clip, the clip for this was laying on the engine compartment. See the clip, that clip right there is there. This one here, it was probably the wrong size, SAE maybe, I don't know. You can put this thing on without even taking this thing off. You take it off here, and then you put it on like this, and then you turn it, and it'll engage. And then you slide it up this way and put the bolt in. See this thing? That's the wrong bolt. Don't use these Allen screws. They use them on this. Don't do this. You can't make them tight enough, and sometimes you can't get them out. Don't use this. This is what the Pope uses when he wants to anoint someone with oil, because this is a breather for the engine, and this thing is inevitably going to get drenched in oil. And don't use these because you can't tighten them, and they're just, the proper one has a baffle. The hose goes here. There's a baffle there to keep this from happening. It keeps it inside the motor. It's a baffle to keep oil vapor from getting into the air filter. And then it came with one of these. I mean, I could think of better places to have spent money on this car. And then the alternator is beautiful, but it's pretty dirty inside. It's pretty old. And then there's the coil. I guess that's what it is for that ignition system. And I'm going to make this thing run. And the engine in it will be worthy of the rest of the car. And this blue has got to go. That's got to go. And yeah, there's no heater. I did mention that, so that's all I can think of right now. That brake hose, I just discovered that today. You never know what you're going to find.